Big news coming in from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has reserved its decision on the formation of a committee to investigate the Adani Hindenburg matter. During the hearing, the court said that it would itself form an inquiry committee to maintain fairness and transparency, and that there is no need for suggestions from the government or any party. On the demand that a sitting judge of the Supreme Court should also be included in the committee, the Chief Justice, Dhananjay Chandrachud, said this is practically not possible. Let me go across to Harish for more on this. Harish, tell us about the exact exchanges between the Chief Justice of India and the Solicitor General, Mr. Tushar Mehta, that transpired in the court, and when is the court now expected to come forward with a proposal to make a committee of its own?
Hello.
Yes, Harish, we can hear you.
Yes, in fact, Siddharth, very significant development as far as the Adani matter is concerned. The Supreme Court has refused to take the list submitted by the center in a seal cover and has reserved its order, saying that and the expert committee should be constituted only from the members and it should be chosen from the names it submits. But in the last order, there was no mention of a seal cover. But today, the Supreme Court, the center, in fact, submitted a list of names on a sealed cover, which the Supreme Court refused to accept and has said that it is not accepting any names and will go on and form its own committee. Back to you.
Yes, Harish. So that's the update coming in from the Supreme Court. What's also very interesting is that the Supreme Court did say that we can't presume there's a failure of the regulatory mechanisms. That was one important oral observation that was made by the Chief Justice of India, Harish, where nobody wants to jump to conclusions about whether or not the regulatory mechanisms are working intact or they've actually failed. Well, Harish, if you can hear me once again, there was an important intervention that was also made by the Supreme Court. We'll come back to that in just a short while. The Chief Justice of India also said that we can't be working on the presumption that the regulatory mechanisms are not working. Remember, the entire idea about forming a committee is to look into whether or not the regulatory mechanisms to monitor the market are actually functioning as they're supposed to. And while, of course, maintaining that the Supreme Court would come forward with certain names to be part of that committee, the Supreme Court was also not willing to jump to conclusions about the performance of regulatory mechanisms. There was another very important development in the Supreme Court today, where the Aam Admi Party had moved the apex court to ensure that the mayoral polls are held in the near future. Now, in response to this, there's been a development now in the court, where the court has now said that a notice of the first meeting shall be issued within a period of 24 hours, and that the mayoral poll should be held very soon, that the aldermen shall not have a right to vote as well. So let me go back to Harish once again. Harish, that's been the bone of contention, has it not, between the BJP and the AAP? The AAP does not want the aldermen to vote. The BJP insisted that they must. And now, of course, the court basically saying that the aldermen cannot have the right to vote, and they've basically called for a speeding up of proceedings with respect to holding the mayoral election.
Yes, that's right, Siddharth. A very big development as far as the petition filed by the Aam Admi Party mayoral candidate Shelly Oberoi is concerned. She had demanded a time-bound timeline for holding of polls and also prayed that the Supreme Court prevent the nominated aldermen from voting in the polls. And now, just now, the Supreme Court bench led by the Chief Justice Chandrachud has said that notice of the first meeting shall be issued within 24 hours, and at the first meeting, election be held for the mayor. And very significantly, he has said that the 10 nominated members, that is the aldermen appointed by the governor, shall not have voting rights, and the first election of mayor shall take place, and he shall hold the election of the deputy mayor and the standing committee members, and elected mayor will preside over the polls for the standing committee also. And as you rightly said, this was the bone of contention, as the Aam Admi Party had accused BJP of trying to muster power using the aldermen and also horse trading from the Congress.
And importantly, Harish, since we are on this point about whether or not the aldermen have a right to vote, the Aam Admi Party had always insisted that they do not, because the constitution does not permit them to, and this was also something that was echoed by the bench during its oral observations as well, that the Constitution of India does not permit aldermen to be voting in a mayoral poll.
Yes, that's right. Even the Chief Justice Chandrachud also echoed what the Aam Aadmi Party has been arguing, saying that the Municipal Corporation Act and also the Constitution provisions specifically says that the nominated members cannot vote and only an elected councillor can have the voting rights. And Supreme Court has upheld that argument and has said that the 10 aldermen nominated by the governor shall not have voting powers. It's a big setback for the BJP and also
yes. Harish, I need to get a response right now from RP Singh of the BJP. Mr. Singh, thank you for speaking to us. This is a big development. That is that the aldermen that have been appointed by the Lieutenant Governor will no longer have any voting rights when it comes to deciding who is the mayor. How do you view this judgment? Because it represents a setback.
Well, there was a High Court judgment earlier which said the voting right will be there. Now there's a new decision by the court. So the Delhi administration will abide by the judgment. That's nothing new. And then we are the one who have been saying that election should be held. It was only the Aam Aadmi Party which went to the court.
And Mr. Singh, the Aam Aadmi Party, of course, approached the court because there was a constant delay in holding the mayoral poll. There were at least 3 sittings of the convention centre and the polls could not go ahead. They will say that they've been given relief, that this represents a victory for them because ultimately the constitution has been upheld. What's your response?
Again, 16th was the date for the elections, which they went to court and said probably they got it deferred. Now, since it has to happen within 24 hours, means by tomorrow evening the elections has to be happened. It's a very welcome step. And as far as voting goes, whatever the court order is, the Delhi administration will have to abide by it. I mean, no can overrule the court order, but there was a court order earlier also of the High Court, which categorically stated that the aldermen can vote.
Okay. So the BJP is saying that they accept the judgment and they'll of course see how the proceedings now pan out in the convention centre the next time the mayoral polls are actually held. We have to slip into a short break. Thank you very much, Harish, for filling us in. We'll come back on the other side with more updates.